We've learned that most bars are actually pouring about 15% more than what they actually sell. And then most bars do not the best job of ensuring that point of sale is programmed in a way that it provides a precise record of what you sold, so you can compare what you're selling against what's being poured at your bar. This is Jamie with Bar Eye. This is the second video in our Optimize Your Point of Sale video series, where we teach you how to program your point of sale in an optimal way to increase profitability at your bar. If you watched the first video, you recall that we described two specific problems with the point of sale, where in some instances we might not charge the correct amount to our customers, and then most bars do not the best job of ensuring that point of sale is programmed in a way that it provides a precise record of what you sold, what's being poured at your bar. So let's delve in now and have some specific examples. I'm going to run through them and then show them with an example of an existing point of sale export from one of our clients. So most importantly, as we talked about, different sizes is where we run into problems, or substitutions being the lesser. So what I mean by that is, if at your bar you have different size drinks, and potentially you might have shots that are different size to singles or cocktail pours, you might have a rocks pour, double pours and martini pours, so you might have 5 different sizes. First of all, you need to decide what different sizes you serve. I would recommend trying to limit those to sort of 2 or 3, so it's not so confusing, you don't need so many buttons. But in general, I suggest applying a principle of 1 drink, 1 button, meaning that every different drink, even if it's the same alcohol but a different size, should have its own dedicated button. Many people will say, you don't need that, we can modify them. Some of the point of sale systems do that okay, but in general, it is much better to have a button for each individual size. And if you're worried about that multiplying the number of buttons in your system and therefore having problems with navigation layout, we can talk about, as we will in the implementation video, some tricks about how to manage that situation. Let's run through the main categories. So with draft beer, a lot of bars just have a single size, but if you're using special signature glasses, so if the Guinness comes in a Guinness glass, you want to pay attention to whether it's the same size and price appropriately. And then of course, also if you've got some high cost or high alcohol beers, those are often served in a smaller size, and it would be a good idea to think about pricing those out so you're not just using the same formula regardless of the size. When it comes to bottled and canned beers, tend to be fairly straightforward, but sometimes we see a problem, particularly with our Midwest clients that tend to drink a lot of domestic beers, is you get confused between, if you're, say we're a Colorado company, most of our clients have got Coors Light served by draft and also in bottles, and maybe sometimes bottles, cans, different sizes. We would recommend using some notation like DFT for draft and BTL for bottle, and if it's BTL or CN for can, also maybe including the size. Because again, if you can't see which button is being used, and if you've got 3 different ways that Coors Light is served, it gets confusing, and so using some sensible notation in there is quite useful to do. The next big area where we need to think about is generic modifiers. So modifiers like with salt, chilled, on the side, extra lime are good examples of modifiers, because they modify the drink but they don't change what's in the drink. But if you are serving a different size, like a single is different obviously to a double, we would say you need to have a separate button for that in most cases, so that you can charge appropriately for it, and so that you can track exactly how much of that product you have sold. Other areas where you might consider this would be signature drinks. So for instance, in a simple case, say you have a Moscow Mule, which normally is served with Tito's. If your customer asks for that mule to be served with something different like Grey Goose, how do you ring that up so that we charge correctly and we can see what was served on the back end? We'll talk about that in more detail. And then to a lesser extent, but still problematic, rotating buttons can be a problem, as well as limited time offers, so special drinks you have for Valentine's or Cinco de Mayo or Christmas or anything like that. And we also need to consider how we're programming those and make sure we're keeping up to date with all those fun drinks. Let's finish up this video by taking a quick look at an example of point of sale system where they're not quite doing this perfectly, so we can see. So let's scroll to the top here. This is a focused point of sale, nice easy layout. So as I said, rotators or seasonal buttons, this causes a problem because if you use different seasonal beers, they probably have different keg costs, and one thing we'd suggest with your managers is when they bring in a new product, make them make a new button for it so we can track the sales, because obviously the keg is going to kick at the end of inventory period, it's going to kick in the middle, and you want to see how the yield was on the first keg and then the keg it was replaced by, which is hard to do if you've got one button for those two drinks. The most common examples and most problematic is double and rocks buttons, where you're serving more alcohol, but if you use a generic modifier, it's not showing you how many of these 19 drinks were, well vodka, how many were Tito's, and how many were Grey Goose. Some systems do allow you to run a report. I don't want to get into too much detail there, but even in those instances where you can break out, you normally get too much detail because you'll see like double with Coke, double with Sprite, double with this. And again, I can't emphasize enough, make a separate button if you have a different size drink is the clearest and best way to ensure that you're charging correctly and you can track these things. Shot is almost like the opposite of doubles because you often serve less. Many bars have a 1 ounce or a 1.25 ounce shot glass in comparison to a standard pour size of 1.5. And so again, if you're serving less, you would need to know that information and perhaps even offer it for slightly less money. Martini is another example. So we normally serve martinis are bigger certainly than a single. And so if you're ringing up a drink as a martini, you might use the double button, and ideally, or one hack is to make your martinis the same size as your double, so you can use one, say Tito's double button is really used for either a double or a martini. And then things like this where we can add a shot to a drink or substituting a signature drinks would be a final example where you probably have some room to improve. Thank you for watching. In the next video, we're going to describe a process to think through and think about implementing changes at your bar's point of sale. Thank you.